最近债券市场炸了锅，收益率飙到几十年最高点，可股市照样天天创新高。摩根大通的老板杰米戴蒙却说，别急着高兴，这背后藏着大雷。他直言，利率不但不会降，还可能更高。美国政府债务30万亿，平均利率 3.5%， 今年还得再借2万亿。全球都在借钱，资本需求爆炸， AI 领域光美国明年就要投1万亿，这都会把利率继续往上推。但更让人担心的是信用市场，5-6万亿的杠杆贷款，一旦利率再涨，很多公司根本还不起，股权价值直接缩水。戴蒙说他自己绝不会在这个位置买信用利差。那股市为什么还能涨？因为政府花钱和 AI 投资也在推高企业利润，可这就像在刀尖上跳舞。戴蒙真正担心的不是公司利润，而是地缘政治、战争、大国对抗，那才是人类的真正风险。聊到 AI， 摩根大通每年砸上百亿美金搞科技。戴蒙说 AI 会改变每一个岗位，不是只有低端工作被淘汰，但他拒绝大规模裁员，而是靠自然流失和再培训。他警告社会必须提前准备，否则一旦变化太快，很多人会掉队。说到纽约市长想给富人加税，戴蒙直接怼回去，我们纽约的员工已经从 3.5 万降到 2.6 万，德州却从 1.2 万涨到 3.3 万，人才用脚投票，反商业的政策只会毁掉城市。最后谈中国，戴蒙认为中美有根本分歧，但也有很多共同利益。他佩服中国的发展，尤其汽车、电池、太阳能，作为投资者一定会盯着中国。但中国经济过度依赖出口，房地产和地缘问题也是真风险。总结一句话，利率还会涨，市场可能颠簸，但真正的胜负手是 AI 怎么重塑就业，以及大国能不能稳住。
The bond market is front and center. We're seeing yields at the highest levels in decades. Yet, we see the stock market keeps rallying. In fact, it's again in the money today. Should we be nervous or not?
Well, I think it's always reasonable in the investing world to be nervous a little bit because you've mentioned the opening. There's a lot of geopolitical risk. You have a bunch of wars going on, which I hope are properly resolved. You have bond rates going up. Inflation is a little bit higher than people thought. But I'm not surprised. I think when people say you should be surprised, like bond rates can go up. The notion that somehow people said they'll never go up is the wrong notion. And so companies like us prepare for higher rates, lower rates, and figure those things can happen. So
the thing is, they're at the highest level in decades. I mean, that is where the surprise could be. I think
they could be much higher than they are today.
Oh yeah?
And,
how much higher?
You say decades, but we've had like one of the greatest bull markets, other than brief COVID. Since the great financial crisis, we've had a huge bull market, huge lower rates for the most part for a long period of time. But the world changes. Like we may have gone from a savings glut to not enough savings. The AI investments, you're talking about in America alone, $450 billion last year, $750 this year, $1 trillion next year. Global deficits at all-time highs, and they are huge. So the governments, including ours, has to borrow huge sums of money, more next year than this year. So, people who own bonds, they tend to look at these things, and both inflation and demands for capital can push up rates.
The thing is, it's not just an inflation story right now. It's also, I guess, a credibility story, right? I mean, we have an environment where everybody's trying to pay debt, and governments around the world have so much debt at a higher level. I mean, at some point, it's going to hit.
Yeah, it is going to hit. Like U.S. government debt is $30 trillion. The average rate is 3.5%. So even today, they can't possibly refinance it at lower than that rate. They have another $2 trillion to do this year. But the thing is, we don't know when. We don't know when the world gets too scared about that. When inflation makes it where people don't want to own long-term duration securities, or when it's just a demand for capital. There have been examples in history where there's so much demand for capital, rates are going up, but it's for a good reason. People are making productive investments in the world. Government spending is often not that. Government spending is much more consumption-related, which doesn't help future productivity. So, and all that spending too drives corporate profits. So people shouldn't be that surprised that corporate profits are doing quite well too, which helps obviously the stock market.
The question, I guess, if I could get you to look in the crystal ball, right? And what yield would that be spillover to the economy, to policy, to markets?
Yeah, so I'm very cautious about crystal balls because I don't think anyone has a crystal ball. We look at all potential possible outcomes, and you'd be surprised from recessions with inflation, from recession with no inflation, from home prices down 40%, stock price down 40%. It's a wide range of outcome. I think when people think this is our forecast, that's what's going to happen. I think that's an intellectual error. I think you should be much more thinking about range of outcomes, possibilities, probabilities. And for us, we want to handle all of them so we can serve our clients. So I'm not that worried about, our profits going down and the stock going. That doesn't worry me at all. I want to serve our clients and do a good job. And I do worry about the geopolitics for the future of mankind. That's a far more important issue in my mind. But just looking forward, I think it's my own view, and it's just different than other people, is that rates can easily go up more and credit spreads can go up more.
And everything's going to be okay, even with rates going up more?
No, at one point you can have a lot of people who have to refi at higher rates. So there's this general assumption that, I can refi all this debt at roughly the similar rate. Well, if credit spreads go up, people, companies, and governments will have to pay more. And so that can put stress in the system and easily could cause a recession type thing. Again, I'm not terrified of recession other than, it hurts people who get laid off. But I think as a scenario, that's a very possible scenario.
There are risks. People have called time on the credit market. If yields continue to rise, there'll be a lot more pressure on the credit market.
Yes.
How might that play out?
Well, a lot of companies are leveraged. There's about $5-6 trillion of leveraged loans out there. They're going to have a hard time refining at those rates. The equity values will be considerably less. Some will be prepared for it. Some hedge for it. A lot of people didn't hedge for it. So, which means that people don't think about it normally, but that means they're taking interest rate risk. And that they should be very cautious when you take interest rate risk. And so this, as you said, this could put pressure on the system.
High yield. There's been so much demand for it. Never mind that inflation is sticky. Is this worrying or not?
Well, you mentioned at the top, there's a little bit of exuberance in the marketplace. Yes. Personally, I'm not a buyer of credit spreads. I am not that interested in what other people do. I would not buy credit spreads at these levels. And other people have other views, but a lot of people out there, remember, they have passive funds buy it. People have to meet indexes. There are a lot of reasons people have to buy, and they're just trying to create a little bit of alpha for themselves, as opposed to would you go absolutely long credit spreads or not. So I would have the luxury of saying we don't have to. Now, of course, we're in the business, so we continue to make loans that I think may be more stressed than people think, but that's part of a long-term strategy. That's not because I like it at this price.
But the thing is, there's so much demand. What's behind that demand? Is it that complacency, I suppose?
Yes, but demand changes. People forget sentiment. If you look at what happened before the crash of 73, or the crash of 82, or the bond market of 94, or the crash of 2000, that was all true. And then things change. And then even if things change about when people talk about liquidity, well, what happens when things get tough is sentiment changes and people want more cash. And so the liquidity requirements change. Money supply changes. Central banks change. Banks pull back. And that all can pull liquidity out of the market at precisely the wrong time. And when people need cash, they sell risky assets. So am I predict that's all going to happen? No, but I wouldn't be surprised that happens.
It's not just about markets, it's about AI, it's about tech. I mean, JP Morgan has come out to say it is actually a tech company that just happens to be a bank. You have a huge tech budget, I think $9 billion, $3 billion for 20 billion, and then I think $3 billion for cybersecurity. Talk to us about how you're mobilizing that capital. Where are your areas of priority?
So we don't actually deploy capital by saying we'll put capital there. We in everywhere we do, in every business, we grow in China. Like here, if you look at just China, we've gone from banking 10 companies to banking, I think it's 200 or 300. We've gone from banking 30 multinationals coming here to banking 600 multinationals coming here. And as we serve them, it deploys capital. So the deployment of capital, deployment loans are an outcome of building the business. That's true for every country. It's true when we open branches in the United States. It starts to demand capital as people give us deposits. We start to make loans. So we are pretty comfortable. We can deploy capital intelligently, serving clients. We don't deploy capital like an investor saying, "Oh, this is the best place to put it." It's a kind of an outcome of how we kind of grow the business.
In terms of AI, though, I mean, how are you investing?
Oh, absolutely. Well, AI, if you or at any business meeting we have, and we've been doing it for 13 years, at every business meeting you have, we talk about how you can use technology to do a better job for your clients. What are the projects you have? So we're using AI for risk, fraud, marketing, design, document management, who you should call in the morning, Salesforce type things, branch location, hedging, and it's the tip of the iceberg. It's moving very, very quick. Coding, it's moving very quickly. So we want to just stay up there and use AI to serve our clients, and we're going to do that. How can I do a better job for our clients using a technology called AI? Just like we did it with a technology called digital, a technology called cloud, and way back a technology called mainframe. Like, it's no different. We got to do a better job for a client because that's how we compete.
So how will JP Morgan look like in 3 to 5 years on the back of developments in AI?
How will what?
How will JP Morgan look like? I mean, how will business?
I hope we're thriving, but like, what's not going to change? People are going to have to hold money, move money, invest money, raise money. I think how that happens will probably change. You know, we use blockchain. There may be more blockchain being used to do that. There may be more people in AI jobs and less people in certain jobs. You know, so it'll all morph, but that's our job to serve the client. And of course, you know, I always point out that in the old days, we had, you know, the big banks were our big competitors, and the investment banks, and that was global. Different banks in every country. Now it's fintech in every country. And they're good, you know. A lot of these people, Revolut, Stripe, and Citadel, they're quite good. So we have to compete with all, and a lot of that competition will be technology and AI. So we are investing that money to be competitive, to do a better job for our clients. And if we're not fast and nimble, we'll lose.
And you're fast and nimble, right?
Sometimes we're fast and nimble. Sometimes I feel like we're a dinosaur and an elephant riding a bronco.
It is about manpower in the end. We've had the likes of manpower, women power. It's about the workforce. We heard from Standard Chartered shedding about 8,000 jobs over a spread of 3 years. We also had Meta saying it's shedding the same number of people. I mean, how are you looking at manpower, women power? How are you looking at the workforce on the back of, you know, advances being made in AI?
I think the most important thing is we do a good job for our clients and use AI. Will it change the structure of jobs? Yes. I think there have been very few announcements that are AI related. I think a lot of companies have too much bureaucracy and they may use AI to cover up the fact that they should never have hired those people in the first place. But AI is going to change jobs. I don't know. I think it'll reduce some of our jobs down the road. I don't think it'll be all different types of jobs and you have to deploy it at a level like, I think we'll be hiring more AI people and probably less bankers in certain categories, and it'll make them more productive. So when you get up in the morning and you want to interview someone, it'll lay out what I've said in 14 different places. It'll give you questions. Your job will be the same. You'll just be much smarter at how you execute that job. So,
but I guess the question
but we will retrain and redeploy our people. You know, we have 10% attrition a year, which means our headcount's going down 25, 30,000 a year, and we're going to be prepared to say, okay, we love these people. They're great. We're going to take care of them. We're going to give them reskilling, new skills, better jobs, move them somewhere else, maybe early retirement. And then I think society maybe need to do a little bit of that. Get prepared, and in my view, that's got to take place locally. So some jobs are across the nation, like AI and cyber and maintaining certain types of equipment and cars. Other jobs are very specialized. You know, this is a mining town, and that's a car manufacturing town, and that's a chemical town, and so, but local schools, and that's, I mean, high schools, community colleges, and colleges should work with the local business and say, I'm going to give these kids certificates in the 12 weeks or 1 year of training they need to have that job. There are going to be 8 million trade jobs which pay $100,000 a year available in the United States in the next 5 years. Okay, so it's not, we're not helpless. We just have to get prepared, kind of have a plan. The plan is if it happens too quick. It may not, but my view is whenever you think there might be a risk, prepare for it. And if it doesn't happen, so be it. Most of the stuff you did in preparation, you should have done anyway.
I just want to be clear. So yours is basically about natural attrition. You're not looking to perhaps downsize because of the efficiencies of AI. That's going to.
It will cause that, but you know that happens that's been happening my whole life. I mean, if you look at all our jobs, they've always been changing how you do jobs. But we will do it to do a better job for our clients. And yes, it will reduce some jobs. We know that. I can't tell you specifically what because you know it's kind of at the early stages. It is every app, every process, every job will be affected. Some will be more productive, some will be not enough jobs, and then we'll help our people, you know, have a good career.
Jamie, there's been a lot of backlash on social from what Standard Chartered CEO Bill Winters said. He talked about how, you know, AI will wipe out the lower value human capital, and a lot of people took issue with how clinical and how cold and how perhaps insensitive that was. Can you weigh in on that? I mean,
okay. Bill's a friend of mine, and all of us say something incorrectly. He's already come back into, you know, taking that back. It was an inartful way to say something, but I also think it'll be all jobs. I don't think it'll be higher level, lower level. I think it'll be more than you think, but it also will create some jobs. So you know, in some ways, if you know back office jobs disappear, we need more front office jobs to cover more clients. So you get a lot of noise from this. I see all the backlash in data centers and AI. I do think it's incumbent upon us, society, to think through if it happens too fast, what do we do about it? you aren't going to stop it all. And you can talk all you want, do the work, get prepared, take care of your people, take care of society, and I think we'll be okay.
We hear that you'll be speaking to New York Mayor Mamdani along with David Solomon. Of course, we know he wants to increase taxes for the wealthy in the city. What's the message you're sending him? What will be your conversation with him?
No, I did meet with him, and I told him exactly all the great things that JP Morgan does, the employees, the taxes, the philanthropy, the biggest in New York, the biggest affordable lender, how we take care of our people, how they all get medical, the minimum wage is $25, just so he understands. And that a lot of what we do in New York is exported around the world. So it's a huge export for the United States, a competitive advantage for the city and a competitive advantage for the United States of America. And they were good citizens. And we always have been, and we talked about affordable housing and childcare, which are his two things. Well, of course. Everyone I know thinks we should do more affordable housing, but I told them it's smart policy that gets that. You can say it all you want, but if you watch governments, they do some things that have the absolute opposite effect of what they say. And I can go through a million examples. Same for childcare. It's got to be done right. It's got to be done effectively. It's got to be place-based. It's got to work. It's got to be thoughtful and stuff like that. Every city, but he had read my chairman's letter, and we went through that every city has to compete. And they have to compete at every level, arts, science, schools. That is what it is. I'm not inventing that. He can be an ideologue. He has to compete too. And we'll see. Will he learn that he's got to make the city a place where people want to grow and build and live and have families and work. And he's got to compete with Shanghai and Hong Kong and Singapore and Nashville, and people vote with their feet. So it isn't this morality thing that people talk about. It's like, are you building a great city with lower crime and stuff like that? I also want to point it out that I did mention to him, because it's important to me, that I am against racism of all types, including anti-Muslim racism, anti-Jewish racism, which I consider anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish, and I think Israel has a right to have a state. So I think there's a little confusion between anti-Semitism. So you may not like what a country's doing. I don't like what Iran is doing. It doesn't make me anti-Muslim. And so I think we have to be a little careful in this, but I want to be absolutely clear. And he acknowledged it, and he said, I think, he kind of agrees.
I want to go back to the taxes that he wants to impose. At what point do you think those taxes will make New York less competitive? At what point do you think, there'll be an erosion of talent within the city?
I think it's already doing that. In my letter, I pointed out that and these are just numbers, JP Morgan, when I got there, had 35,000 employees in New York City, and now it's 26,000. We had 12,000 in Texas, and now it's 33,000. That is because of individual taxes, corporate taxes, state taxes, but also the schools in Dallas. They've become very good. The life in Dallas. The Dallas mayor calls up all the time saying, what can I do to help you? I have land over here. I have, and that is pro-business and people love living there. And that's what New York City, now New York's a wonderful place too, but that is the result. When I grew up in New York City, and this is an amazing number, in the 70s, they had 120 of the Fortune 500 were in New York City. In those 10 years, or about those 10 years, 60 left or failed or merged out, mostly because of things like taxes and crime and stuff like that. And those are big names like GE, IBM, American Airlines, and is that what you want? And that's what people seem to want. They think that somehow being anti-business is going to help a city. It's not. So we all want to pay fair taxes. That's not the point, but at one point people vote with their feet, and there are a lot of studies that have shown that all these people moved out, and they're obviously New York's booming, so you're not going to see in this year's taxes, but a lot of people are paying billions of dollars taxes left. Why do you want that? How does that help the lower paid person in New York?
Just one final question before we let you go.
I also, when I hear these people talk, when they say fair taxes, fair share, what do they mean? Like, I agree with the fact, if it were up to me, I saw Jeff Bezos, who I love, swashbuckling, fighting. I don't think the lower people making under a certain amount have to pay any taxes at all. I would agree with that. But when they say fair share, what do they mean? I mean, they should give a number and say that's a fair share. So we'll see. So
what do you make of the beef Mamdani has with Ken Griffin? I mean, there's been a lot of pushback as well from...
my view is, I didn't speak to him about that. I think he realized he made a mistake in naming Ken, vilifying a name and a person. And my grandparents were all Greek immigrants, okay? I've been working my ass off now for a long time. I think vilifying people, simplifying arguments, even if you think it's politically is a bad idea. And I think he probably realizes that was a bad idea. It's probably why he's seen a bunch of us now. He'd like to maybe have a better relation with the business community. But we'll all be doing the same thing. What does he do? I don't care what he says. What does he do? I will judge that. And so will what actually happens, because you can talk about morality and ideology all you want, but if things don't get better, you didn't do a good job. And in my view, and I'm talking about him now, I have seen mayors who make statements and they make it worse and worse and worse. And they don't know, they can't get into the details of why is affordable housing not there anymore? Why does this not work? And so hopefully he'll learn. I want him to do a good job. I'm not against him. So,
Jamie, I'd be remiss not to ask you about China. We are in China after all. We saw that, warm chemistry between the two leaders, Xi Jinping as well as Donald Trump. Does that change your perspective on China and perhaps, the appetite for investments here?
Not really. Look, I think, look, we have, China and America have real differences. And I think these wars also highlight that, America, we want Ukraine to end up as a free and democratic state. I'm not saying, I don't know about the war, but I'd like to see Iran end up without nuclear weapons and no one controlling the Straits of Hormuz. And I also object to the notion that somehow Iran wasn't a threat. They've been killing and murdering people for 47 years. That's not a threat. Okay, and a lot of Americans, a lot of Muslims, a lot of Jews, a lot of other people, they've been having proxy wars, for 40. I don't know why you allowed these proxy war thing. So that makes it more complicated. But and put Taiwan aside, America and China have a lot in common. Okay, we want to help our people. This country's grown dramatically. I think that's a wonderful thing. We have a lot of common interests in anti-terrorism, anti-nuclear proliferation, the proper control of some of these AI things which can damage society. So they should engage all the time at every level. Work out the trade differences. There were going to be some real differences in that. And then, have a good, proper relationship. I think it's good for both. I think it's good for the world. The world has got to deal with these two huge, powerful countries, and we should help each other and help the world. And so, I like the fact they did. I applaud they're doing it.
What's the biggest risk for the Chinese economy right now, you think?
The Chinese economy? They've been very smart in managing their economy for years, but I would say too much reliance on exports. They know that. That's been in their plans. That irritates a lot of the countries around the world. I think that their neighbors around the South China Sea are getting quite upset with them about their behavior in the South China Sea. Not because of anything that America does. And trade. We should work out trade in a way that doesn't damage the global economy. So, but look, they've been quite, and also some of the capital allocation in real estate and some of the local stuff. But my experience with the Chinese is they kind of know these issues and they kind of go about attacking them strategically, correctly over time.
But is there a sense that China has become somewhat of a safe haven given, all the chaos elsewhere in the world?
No, but but it's somewhat artificial. I mean, America's still a safe haven. I mean, we just surprised people, that recently, but we're still probably one of the safest countries in the world, the best investment destination in the world, the most secure rule of law. When they give you $1, you can do whatever you want with it. But China has become a large, important country, and I applaud that. I'm not against that. And they, of course, think that they're more consistent with other countries. That's been true a little bit recently.
Do you think
that's not forever? That's recently.
But is that changing the perception of investors, though? I mean, are they looking to China as
a little bit? But if I was an investor, I'd always be looking at a place like China. When you look at China, when any investor comes here, you just have to be impressed with their cars and their batteries and their solar and their machine tools and their capabilities. So of course, that's how investors are seeking out opportunities around the world, and there'll be plenty of opportunities here.